Hi, it's Colin Healey from Premier American Uranium. I'm here with Greg Huffman of Nuclear Fuels. We are in the process of combining these two companies, and we're looking forward to creating America's leading exploration and development uranium-focused company and creating a larger platform to carry out our continued portfolio building exercise to create value for shareholders.
Okay. Gentlemen, good to see you. Good to see you indeed. Why is bigger better, Colin?
I think bigger is better because every transaction that we contemplate becomes less of a dilutive impact so it protects shareholders, and it gives us the ability to go out and build the portfolio faster and make larger acquisitions. So I think in every way it's a stronger platform to carry out our mandate. And
with cash.
For sure.
Well, tell me about it. You've got some money, haven't you?
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the, nuclear fuels, the most attractive thing about nuclear fuels for us was the Kaycee project, but they also had really successful financing back in November of 2024, where they raised $14 million, which was a great feat for the size for any company, really, but particularly for their size. So, it was a really comforting, we really liked the project, Kaycee, we liked the company, we liked the management, we liked the board. But it's also very comforting to see that kind of market support for an asset that you're targeting. We were close to making a decision about additional financing for our company. Their company had a lot of cash, so there's a lot of kind of synergy from the balance sheet perspective, as well as doubling our footprint in Wyoming, dramatically increasing our exploration targets in Wyoming. So it made a lot of sense. In pretty much every aspect that we were looking at.
Right, and obviously you've got a few big backers in this. That's from Cove, Encore, ISO, Mega, etc. I mean, how do they feel about this? What were their expectations of this joint venture? Or sorry, of this merger, I should say. Sorry.
Well, you know that the co-founder of Sagem Cove is co-founded by Mike Alkin, who runs the investment portfolio for Sagem, and Tim Rotolo. And Tim Rotolo is chairman of our board. So it was... obviously, there was support at least from our board for the transaction. So, it's great to have that kind of direct information about your largest shareholders, kind of being supportive of the transaction. But I mean, it was such an attractive asset and company for us. It was, like I said, the number one kind of target within our portfolio. So I think it wasn't a difficult sell to our board, and you get in the process of acquisition, you get a chance to go in and do your due diligence and make sure it's everything that you think it was, and it was. So it was, our technical team presents to our board our expectations through that process were really met, and so we were excited to kind of move forward with the transaction.
Okay, Greg, I've got to ask you this: was it a easy sell to you? Because obviously size is great, and I love your comments on that one. But you had cash. Why not go alone?
Yeah, no, and it was a fairly in-depth internal conversation about the timing and sort of just the nature of the transaction overall, because we were really excited to get back to work at Kaycee. With at least 100,000 feet worth of drilling over the course of the 2025 campaign, following up on what we felt was a very, very successful 2024 of both, initially infill and extensional drilling on the historical resource, and then following up with a couple new discoveries as well later on in the program. So it was something. But when Colin and I, started the conversations, it was something where we thought that bringing the companies together at the right ratio would make a lot of sense for both shareholder bases. Obviously, we brought the Kaycee project, our flagship, but also a pipeline of other projects focused in Wyoming, all in situ amenable. But then also our cash balance and our strategic relationship with our largest shareholder, Encore Energy. So from our side, there was quite a few things that we brought to the table. What we really, really liked about Premier American Uranium was, in addition to their shareholder base that you already mentioned, represented by Tim Rotolo on the board with Sagem Cove, but also ISO Energy, Mega Uranium, sort of very deep pocketed, larger index weightings, but then also a more advanced stage project in Sevieta in New Mexico. For me, that was something where, rather than just focused on sort of pretty grassroots exploration, in advancing on that aspect. Having a PA stage project that basically brought some 43101 compliant pounds to our shareholder base, and with the ratio giving nuclear fuel shareholders 41% of the combined entity, we really thought that was a good dovetail with our sort of exploration focused in Wyoming. So really brings the best of both worlds, in addition to having both a foot in the ISR as well as in the conventional mining camp from a uranium perspective.
Well, I think that we want to let that be led by the drill bit to some degree. We're going to we're going to allocate capital where we think we can create the most value. So if Cyclone or if Kaycee is showing fantastic potential to kind of delineate a resource, and we want to attack that, that's where the capital is going to go, because like Greg said, it was attractive for nuclear fuels to throw some pounds onto the combined balance sheet, or it gives shareholders some exposure to a more advanced stage asset. For us, the same rules apply. The more advanced stage assets, the resources, the defined resources in the ground get premium valuations because they remove risk and uncertainty. So for sure, it's going to be kind of results driven. There's a lot of projects in the portfolio that will probably be sort of held or secondary because we see so much potential in the ones we're working. But we've got 2 drill programs underway right now. Excuse me. One in the Great Divide Basin, our Cyclone project. Kaycee, like Greg mentioned, at least 100,000 feet being drilled there. Both of those projects within proximity of individually each 2 licensed uranium processing facilities within, I think, less than 20 miles from both projects. So very strategic position. So I think that you're going to continue to see a lot of capital get out, or the majority of the capital being allocated to Sevieta, New Mexico, and the 2 Wyoming projects, because we think those are the best potential avenues to create value for shareholders.
Okay, and I'll promise to come into the projects proper in a second, but just in terms of the nuances of detail of how companies come together and the savings to be made, things like your geological databases, historic drilling data, etc. Do you need to kind of bring those together under one piece of software? I mean, how does that work? And then who interrogates it?
I mean, Greg has a team at Kaycee that is extremely tenured and experienced in managing that type of data. And on our side, we do the same thing at Cyclone. And you leverage the 2 technical groups, but you staff. Each group has those needs, and there's not a lot of necessarily synergy between combining 2 databases for 2 remote projects, but there is synergy in the expertise that comes alongside. So Greg's got a very capable, experienced team on his side. Our team is extremely capable as well. So I think that there's going to be some cross-pollination, and the best practices of both will be combined so that we have a very efficient structure for management of data. But the direct synergy happens mostly at the corporate level because the projects are properly staffed. But at the corporate level, managing permitting and other types of regulatory things in Wyoming become simplified. It'll still be one group doing all of the permitting most likely, and that there's savings in that for sure. So there's definitely some synergy to be had on the administrative side. But at the project level, they're kind of staffed the way that they should be.
What about the kind of non-core projects you're not going to work on initially? I mean, are you looking, and like I'm not saying you're a project generator at this point, but are there JVs to be had? Are there spin-outs to be had? You need to kind of take the pressure off of holding costs or whatever other kind of running costs on the non-core stuff. A lot going on in Wyoming. Why not?
Yeah, I think that all of those things, there's potential, particularly with our Irvin mineral belt stuff in Colorado. There's groups that are focused on that area specifically. If there's some assets elsewhere within their portfolio that make sense, there could be some horse trading. JVs in a strong uranium price environment, JVs and earn-ins are definitely a great way to kind of create additional news flow from your portfolio without spending a lot of administrative time or additional money. If you can move operatorship to a third party, so I do think that all of those are going to be avenues for us to kind of work our portfolio more than the 3 projects that we're already kind of working internally.
Okay, and Greg, obviously a lot to be settled and it's got to close. But in terms of and we understand the roles of the technical teams, what about at board level and board representation? You know, what's your team's role going forward in this, and do you think that works for you?
Yeah, and that was again, an important part of the transaction negotiations that went on. So as part of that, Nuclear Fuels has the right to nominate 2 directors to the board of Premier American Uranium. I'll be one of those 2 nominees. The second is still TBD. But yeah, people who know me, I'm very hands-on, and can in my current role with Nuclear Fuels, I've committed to staying very, very involved through the course of the current drill program. I spent a lot of time down in Wyoming with the team there, dealing with the local stakeholders, dealing with the geological staff, and just making sure everything's running really smoothly. And I'll continue to do that through the balance of this drill program post-closing of the transaction. And then, we'll take on probably a more traditional sort of board of director member. But obviously, Colin and I, both come from capital markets background. We see a lot of opportunities, for additional assets to bring into the portfolio, both in Wyoming and beyond. And I think having a foot in both the ISR camp as well as in the conventional camp with our respective teams, really gives us a huge amount of opportunity to follow up on. So for me, I'll stay very, very involved from a director perspective on a go forward basis, and probably helping Colin out quite a bit from the strategic initiatives perspective.
Okay, and then Colin, obviously on the strategic side of things, you've got to define what sort of company you are. Obviously, a big exploration portfolio in the US, which is great given the current environment. But if I look at companies like ISO and others, where they've tried to kind of move towards a kind of producer profile or a developer profile quite quickly to take advantage of maybe the kind of re-rate there, how do you see things playing out with your portfolio?
I think that the Wyoming assets are earlier stage, only historic resources, exploration targets. So it's going to be a process, but I do think that those can report to production potentially faster than people think, because, the Kaycee project is less than 20 miles to the west of Christensen Ranch, Irigaray, and less than 20 miles to the west of Nichols Ranch. So 2 licensed semi-operating production facilities. If you get that critical mass, the low end on the exploration target for resource there in the 43-101 report is 11.5 million pounds, goes all the way to 30 million pounds. 11.5 million pounds to me is beyond critical mass to be a satellite. I think that 2-3 years from now, when those resources are probably potentially being delineated, that the existing processing facilities in the U.S. are going to be looking for feed and possibly expansion, because there's going to be a push to grow uranium production in the U.S. There already is, and I think that it will be not too difficult to acquire, especially in Wyoming, which is an agreement state, acquire those planned expansion licenses, and then it'll be a matter of capital. And if the uranium price is where we think it's going to be, then those plants could be expanded. And if that avenue doesn't play out at 11.5 million pounds or better on the low end of the exploration target, you can build your own central processing plant and production facility. And so I really think that. And similarly at Cyclone, our exploration target there is 8 to 12.5 million pounds, meeting the threshold in my mind as a satellite facility. We've got Lost Creek within 12 to 14 miles to the east of it, and then the Sweetwater Mill, which is a licensed facility but not an ISR processing facility, also about 12 miles to the east. So very strategic positioning in Wyoming for these 2 assets. And so can they report to production? It remains to be seen. There's still exploration stage. We need to define the resources. But when we do, being in close proximity to existing production, I think is going to give us the ability to potentially move those quickly to monetization, to extraction. So what happens in New Mexico? Once we get the preliminary economics out there, we want to let that drive the next steps. and there's more work to be done. It's a very kind of pretty well defined process of moving through PEA, going out, drilling on closer, like increasing the definition of your resource from kind of, we still have an inferred component, but you want to bring that into the indicated or measured category, and then do some metallurgical work to backfill some of the assumptions of the PEA to create a pre-feasibility study, and at the same time begin the process of environmental permitting work, and the eventual permitting of a producing operation there. So, but we always want to be moving forward, moving these things towards potential development, because the re-rating that you talked about is real, and we see it in existing producers, and it's a great. I think no matter how you plan on advancing your assets, whether it be by JV, whether it be by toll milling, you have to always be on that advancing process, decreasing the time between present and cash flow. And this is how you create the most value in the assets. Advancing them towards production is always going to be key.
Absolutely. And to that, obviously with Kaycee, I mean, maybe one for you, Greg. Obviously, you've kind of got the Encore 51% buyback threshold conversation that we've had in the past. So how does that change things, or how have things changed on that?
Yeah, and nothing really changes on that front, and I might let Colin pipe in here afterwards. But yeah, obviously, Encore does have the buyback option as it relates to the Kaycee project, because when they initially sold it to us, they do like the asset a lot and think there is big potential for it to be a standalone operation unto itself with its own processing facility. And that was something that Colin and I had quite a few discussions on when we started these conversations about potentially putting the two companies together, and to make sure that the Premium American Uranium team understood a lot of the nuances of that agreement. And obviously it's something that people are often cautious about when they first come to the story, but over my tenure as CEO of Nuclear Fuels, we've had great success in terms of sitting down with people and explaining the nature of those terms to investors. And I've not had one who's come back uncomfortable after we walk through it. And actually, it's a huge advantage with Encore being one of the largest domestic U.S. uranium producers out of Texas, and the two operations there, to have them not only on the register, but with that opportunity to potentially come in as a development partner at the asset level, and even probably as or even more importantly as a funding partner there. And Colin, maybe I'll just let you sort of speak to what your guys' findings were as it relates to the Encore side.
Yeah, I think Greg, the way Greg's describing the response from investors in his company was very much our response after we were able to take a good look at it during due diligence and see and dig into the nuances of that contract, and we found it to be quite favorable. Potentially 2.5 times reimbursement of exploration costs and this is an option that Encore has, right? So you have a lot of ability to affect whether or not they take up that option by how much work you do, the timing of when you put out a resource. You can update the market on resource without triggering that option all the way up to 15 million pounds before, and it's a 15 million pound measured and indicated. Greg, you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but that takes more time and work than say an inferred resource. So there's a lot of control in the operator's hands here about when that option gets triggered and what the potential returns of that option are. When you're reimbursing 2.5 times exploration costs, but you have control over the exploration costs, it gives you a lot of control over how and when that occurs. So we really liked it following due diligence, and we were happy.
In terms of the kind of ETF inclusion, and as Greg mentioned earlier, scale really helps there. Do we know the size of the company after closing?
At launch, the pro forma company was around $102 million. But that would, even as it sits now, we think that we would meet the free throw. The URNM and URNJ together, we're kind of, they're about 10% of Premier right now. Greg's, with the addition of Nuclear Fuels and the kind of, them being 40% of the company, we see buying from the URNJ, we see a buying requirement from the URNM, but we also see us potentially qualifying for the URA, the Global X Uranium ETF. And we saw in Premier the buying when URNM rebalanced back in March, we went from 90 cents to $1.70 because we're so tightly held that any unanswered buying pressure on our stock really moves the stock. And we think that the URNJ, the URNM, and the URA at their rebalancing points are all going to be buyers of substantial shares. So this is a kind of capital markets related catalyst for the stock that it's difficult to predict exactly how much too far ahead of time, how much buying would be required. But we do see them there in size, and I think it's going to be a big catalyst for the stock.
Right, and obviously people are going to, I imagine you get asked every day of the week about US listing off the back of this as well. You're predominantly US asset. Why not?
Yeah, and I think that would be the plan. Following close creates a much larger company, and I see the success that some of our peers have had as they transition to a U.S. listing. Companies with the U.S. focus, including Encore, quickly saw the majority of their volume in the U.S. market. It's a substantially larger market and investor pool than the Canadian market, so it could be a real catalyst, and I think that it's the right vehicle for that. So that will be in the plan going forward for sure.
Okay, and again, obviously we've seen in the last sort of couple of years that exploration, pure play exploration, not really getting rewarded in the market. There's been a bump in the last 2 months and especially in the last week for uranium companies, which is very welcome. But what are the things that you're going to be doing that you're in control of, not market related, such as resource update or ISR pilot or PEA, whatever, that you think will be valued going forward?
I think drilling 2 projects and having the largest combined exploration drill programs of any non-production focused uranium company in the U.S. is going to be major. It gives us the ability to deliver results on a drilling results and updates on a consistent basis from now until almost the end of the year. Plus, on our more advanced asset, talking about the initial economics of it. These are all kind of the way to make the stock interesting and show the incremental value creation is by putting out the news flow as we start to kind of understand the earlier stage assets better through the drill bit and justify the further cost of development at Sevieta. So I think it's a pretty strong profile of news and catalyst. And when you layer on top of that the ETF inclusion that you talked about, some predictable buying in a stock is just rare and can be quite compelling as a catalyst for price. So I think that it's really becoming the de facto U.S. exploration and development stock that doesn't have production exposure yet for investors. So we're really excited to kind of create this larger company.
Okay, and explain to me why, because I do want to pick you up on it with regards to expiration being valid. I kind of get the moving closer to sort of economic phase getting rewarded, but so far, spending money on expiration hasn't done much for anyone. What's coming down the line which is going to change that? Why will people start to value that, do you think? Why should they?
I can hop in there because I really think that expiration is the main driver of value in a normally functioning junior market. That's really where the real value is created. Right now, we've been stuck in a junior uranium sort of equity environment that is moving not with drill results, but rather with the spot price of uranium. So we've been stuck with that, and we really think that as we advance through the year, and there's talk of additional executive orders specific to uranium. We've seen the nuclear related ones. We've seen the technology companies' investments in nuclear and as it relates to their AI initiatives. We really haven't heard about how that's all going to be fueled. And that's gonna come down the pipes at some point. We don't know exactly when, but there's going to be a huge push for domestic to reignite that domestic uranium and nuclear fuel supply chain. And as part of that's going to be exploration. Without exploration, we really can't ramp back up domestic U.S. production. Remember back in the 60s, 70s, and into the early 80s, the U.S. was self-sufficient from a uranium production perspective. The U.S. has the ability to produce a lot of uranium, and I don't think that all the big uranium deposits have been found. And so we really think that that's an opportunity here for us to create a lot of value. as soon as the market starts to pay for that. So we're going to continue to be aggressive, be ready for when that happens, and have lots of potential news flow from both aspects, both the nuclear fuel side as well as the premier American uranium. I think, you look at the 2024 numbers, there's not, the combined companies drilled more than all of the rest of the exploration development uranium companies in the U.S. combined. We're very focused on exploration.
And I want to talk to that because I had a bunch of technical questions lined up about Sevieta and Cyclone and Kaycee, but I think it's more important for people to understand what's coming. We've just seen a move in rare earths be driven by the U.S. Department of Defense. I know you guys have been in Washington and talking to the U.S. Department of Energy, etc. Critical minerals are actually starting to mean something here. So let's talk about the U.S. explorers, developers, and I guess producers, all two of them. It's not enough to deliver against U.S. demand for sure. What does being a U.S. asset-based company and potentially U.S. listed company do for you in those sorts of conversations for funding? With government or down over in New York. I mean, what are you hearing? What are you seeing?
I think there's there's plenty of investment excitement around uranium, but it hasn't trickled down, like Greg said, to Explorcos. And I think one of the issues that will really unlock that, for sure, it's always going to be spot price. But once we see a few of the kind of neo producers, the transitioning producers, really have some success and generate material cash flow from the assets, doing what we're trying to explore for successfully, that's going to have a major impact on Explorcos. What are we looking for? We're looking for uranium. We're looking for ISR uranium in Wyoming. We have a resource in New Mexico, but until we see some successful analogs of U.S. production, or a higher uranium price, it's going to be tempered. But and I think we're on the precipice of seeing some successful U.S. production, particularly in the ISR space. We're also starting to see it in the conventional space in energy fuels. And the more success that we have in generating cash flows from assets like ours, the more money is going to be available to explore for and develop assets like ours. So I think we're very, very close to starting to see some of the neo producers generate some positive results in cash flow. And once we have that, I think you're going to get recognition for the earlier stage stuff, because you need to know why you're doing it. And that will be an immediate reminder of why you want to be investing in this. And in the U.S., our focus on the U.S. is highly related to our view that the U.S. is going to be extremely supportive. We're already seeing regulatory support at the federal level. Wyoming in particular, fantastic state to operate in as an agreement state. Permitted and saw Lost Creek get built, saw Nichols Ranch get built. So great state to operate in. On a federal level, New Mexico is starting to get prioritized. We're seeing progress there. So, I mean, we've never seen such a supportive environment in the U.S. for new uranium production. And like Greg said, it's up until the last kind of couple of years, it was almost nothing. And they've got great resources and great people and the potential to be self-sufficient. So I think they're going to move in that direction, and it will take time, but successful analogs are going to really help junior explorers.
Okay. And you guys got enough support to get this thing closed?
We have voter support agreements from the management and board. It's a friendly transaction, so it will be uncommon for those to not end up getting the shareholder support. It's being recommended by the board and the key people at Nuclear Fuels, and I think that it'll be successful. But Greg, if you have any additional perspective there.
Yeah, no, we're confident. It's been well received in the marketing that Colin and I have done jointly, and from the majority of the shareholder base of both companies. They understand the rationale, bringing the two companies together. Bigger is better, as you started off with. As it relates to uranium exploration and development in terms of accessing capital particularly, but also garnering investor attention, both active money as well as from the ETF. So yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense here on a go forward basis, particularly with the tailwinds that we're seeing from the government support in the US.
Okay, so your current shareholders, obviously, sounds like you're asking them to support this, and new shareholders looking in. Something meaningful to look at and consider.
Yeah, I think so. I think that
There we go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Matt, sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, from the point when you announce a transaction to the point where you have a record date, which was July 7th, Greg, I'm pretty sure. You've got this period where people are buying the stock, and the majority of the people, in my opinion, buying nuclear fuel shares during that period are ones who are supportive of the transaction, trying to take advantage of the premium. So to really realize on that, because there's always a bit of a discount right up until close generally, but to take advantage of that, you're generally going to be supportive in the vote to protect your investment and to realize that premium. So I think that just the mechanics of how these deals work tend to lend themselves. Like we've got voter support agreements for 22% of nuclear fuel shareholders to the management and board, but just the mechanics of how and the process of how these things come about is generally pretty supportive of a positive shareholder vote by the time it occurs.
Okay, well, gentlemen, good luck, and I'll go early and say congratulations, and we'll see you soon.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.